friends, I'm Jill Wyoskowski, a librarian at Caroline Kennedy Library, and this is an episode of Xpressions. Xpressions is an art program geared for teens and will meet in person once the library reopens and in-person programming resumes. In the meantime, we'll be sharing episodes via YouTube to help spark your creativity. Disclaimer, I am not an artist and I do not pretend my art is even good, but it is something that I truly enjoy doing. With that said, no matter what your skill level is, we're here to be creative, make art, and most importantly, to have fun. In this episode of Xpressions, I'll show you how to draw a Zentangle pattern we'll call something squared. Before we dive in and get drawing, I'd like to give the lowdown on Zentangles. The Zentangle is a free-form drawing that is structured from shapes with repeating patterns made from a combination of points, lines, simple curves, and circles. Blah, blah, blah. You could say a Zentangle is an abstract drawing using repetitive patterns. A characteristic of the Zentangle is that they can be viewed equally, no matter which way you turn the paper. And the idea came from former monk Rick Roberts and artist Maria Thomas, who brought together Zen, from meditation, and art. No religion is involved, just art. The Zentangle style of drawing is a fun and relaxing way to create beautiful images. So, let's get started. The supplies needed are pretty easy, things you probably already have at home. I use squares of scrap paper, but any piece of blank paper will work. My recommendation is that you start small. The scrap paper squares kicking around on my desk are about 4x4. You'll need a basic ink pen or an ultra-fine point marker. Optional, colored pencils or colored fine point markers if you wish to add some pizzazz to your Zentangle. For this Zentangle, something squared, we'll be drawing, you guessed it, squares, but also some lines in between the squares every now and then. In the center of your paper, draw a simple square. No ruler is needed. In fact, the more imperfect your square, the better. Inside your square, draw 2 to 3 smaller squares nestled inside of each other. Next up, we're going to draw more squares fanning out from the center, kind of like flower petals. Your squares need not be perfect or laid out symmetrically. Now it's time to add the smaller squares inside of the squares you just drew. Next up, we're going to add some lines which will fill in the gaps between your squares. To do this, draw a line connecting one corner of a square to the next nearby corner. Funky angles are the best, so please run with them. It's time to add some more lines. The best way to describe this step is to think of a spider web. Draw straight-ish lines between the squares. Fill in the empty space. The next step is a repeat of an earlier step. Draw more squares fanning out around your squares and webbing. I'm gonna be honest, the less perfect your squares are drawn, all the better. As we did before, add smaller squares within the squares you just drew, and then fill in the gaps between the squares with the webbing. You can repeat these steps as much as you wish. After all, this is your piece of art. An optional last step. You may want to consider adding color with colored pencils or ultra fine point markers. I'm a fan of the monochromatic look and opted for shades, tones, and tints of green. Thanks for stopping by and checking out this episode of Xpressions. We would love to see your art. Tag us on social media using DHCL Teens. Before we wrap up, did you know that Dearborn Heights City Libraries are offering curbside pickup? You can request books, movies, music, and even video games via our website, dhcl.michlibrary.org, by phone or even email, and we'll bring the items right out to you. Home delivery is also an option. Last blurb, I promise. Did you know that with your library card you have access to thousands of hours of streamable music and movies all via Hoopla? Visit our website at dhcl.michlibrary.org and click on Electronic Resources. I'm Jill Wyoskowski with Caroline Kennedy Library. Stay connected with us at dhcl.michlibrary.org and on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and now on Pinterest. Thanks for tuning in.